Hey guys, my name is Jason. I am the founder of Distress Loan Advisors. Since 2009, I have primarily been helping SBA borrowers settle their SBA loans when they're no longer able to pay. Typically, that's when a business goes under or it gets sold and there's a deficiency so large that the individual who personally guaranteed the debt cannot afford to repay the debt over any reasonable period of time. So for the last year or two, I've been doing a lot of focusing on the EIDL loan, but today I'm going to put the EIDL loan aside. We're going to talk about the SBA offer in compromise. What is it? Who's eligible? What can you expect? So let me just take you back for a second. So I was working for a lender in 2008 by the name of CIT Small Business Lending. No need to look them up. They don't exist anymore. But at the time, they were the largest SBA 7A lender in the nation. Nobody underwrote more SBA 7A loans than CIT Small Business Lending. So I got hired there in summer of 2008. In the fall of 2008, the financial crisis hit. So immediately overnight, they stopped underwriting SBA loans. But they had such a huge loan portfolio that they moved all of their underwriters over to workout. So, twist of fate, because I knew everything about underwriting. I didn't know much about workout at the time, but 2 years later, there I was, a team leader handling the Western United States. I had a bunch of other workout officers that I was in charge of, and we had this huge portfolio, $400 million in delinquent SBA loans. So needless to say, over those 2 years, I learned so much about how this process works. And then, of course, since 2009, when I left to open my own consulting shop, I have settled hundreds of these and I've spoken with thousands of people. So SBA offer in compromise, what is it? So basically, when you take an SBA loan, a 7A loan in particular, they always ask for a personal guarantee. And as a result, if your business goes under, chances are the SBA is not going to really pursue your business because they understand it's just a legal entity that typically doesn't have much in the way of assets or the way of income. So they're really not going to be that focused on that entity. I mean, sure, they'll want to liquidate the assets, and depending on how big your enterprise is, it could be easy or it could be a little bit more difficult. But at the end of the day, the assets get liquidated and applied to the loan balance. And then at that point, that's when the SBA comes to you and they say, Jason, you borrowed $1 million. We were able to recover $100,000 from the sale of your equipment. There's a $900,000 deficiency here. How are you going to pay us back as the personal guarantor? Because the personal guarantee means that you're agreeing to repay the debt in the event that the borrower, your legal entity, cannot. And so they have plenty of tools to collect from you as an individual, which is why it's really important to be proactive about trying to settle your SBA personal guarantee. I've seen this before, so I'll just tell you, the people who don't come to me, the people who just kind of ignore it, are really just setting themselves up for problems. First of all, your lender can sue you. They can get a judgment. Once they get a judgment, they can levy bank accounts. They can garnish your wages. They can put judgment liens on homes. It's not good stuff, and it's really designed to make your life difficult and for them to forcibly recover whatever cash they can. Now, the alternative to that is to go to them and say, look, I can't pay you in full. I can pay you something. And so that's what I would like to do. And lenders are receptive to this. The vast majority of lenders understand that the SBA offer in compromise is specifically designed for this situation. So, in other words, they're not negotiating for the sake of negotiating. So if you owe them $50,000 and you've got $100,000 in your checking account, you're not going to be able to settle. Offer in compromise is not going to be on the table. But if you owe $1 million and you've got $50,000 in your bank account and you don't make enough money to pay much more than your monthly bills, and you don't really have any other assets, that's a situation that the offer in compromise was designed for. The SBA understands that it's better to get something than nothing. And if they aggressively pursue you, a lot of people are just gonna file for personal bankruptcy, and the SBA gets nothing. And that's what this SBA offer in compromise is all about. This is the SBA making a smart business decision and saying, if we can get something from you and it's less than the full balance, we're willing to do that if you can demonstrate to us that that number that you're offering us truly is the most you can afford. And that's what I help people do. I help people figure out how much should they offer given their circumstance. And everybody comes to me and they look at my website and they say, oh, I saw you settled one for 4 cents on the dollar. I want that deal. And the answer is, what you settle for is really going to be specific to your personal finances. So they don't necessarily have an arbitrary amount that they're looking for from everybody. They're going to ask you for a personal financial statement. They're going to ask you for tax returns, pay stubs, bank statements. It's like reapplying for the loan all over again, except this time you're trying to prove to them that you can't pay it in full. And so my job is to help you make that argument. And it's not random, it's not arbitrary. It really is based on your personal finances. And so the value that I'm bringing in those cases is I've done so many of these, I have a pretty good grasp on what the SBA is focused on, what they're looking for, and how do we address all the specifics of your situation. So if you have high income, if you have a lot in savings, if you have a lot in equity, if your spouse guaranteed, if your spouse didn't guarantee, there's all sorts of tiny little nuance. And, people have certainly said to me in the past, well, it's just a bunch of forms. Well, what can you do that I can't in terms of filling out forms? And the answer to that is it's one thing to fill out the form. It's another thing to do it well. I've seen a lot of people try to fill them out themselves. Kind of a disaster. With that said, of course, I can't guarantee that me working on it will result in a settlement, but I can guarantee that I have a lot more experience with this than you do. And so, what I do is I go through the personal financial statement and I identify potential issues, red flags. What are things that the SBA is going to focus on, and how do we overcome them? How do we address them proactively instead of just throwing against the wall, see if it sticks, and expecting them to come back to us? We're going to go in with an offer that makes sense based on your circumstances that the lender can support and then send to the SBA, who actually makes the final decision. So I know I've been talking for a while, but here's the process in a nutshell. Step one, your business needs to close. The process, if you want to settle, if you want to have an offer in compromise approved for your SBA 7A loan, here are the steps. One, the business needs to cease operating, so it needs to close. If you sell it, that's fine too. Two, the assets of the business need to be liquidated. Make sure you get permission from the lender before you liquidate those assets. I've seen all sorts of problems come up when people sell the stuff and then they pocket the money. Your lender needs to approve the sale of those assets. Once the sale of the assets is done and the proceeds have been applied to the loan balance, and then at that point, we go ahead and submit the offer in compromise. I could talk for hours about all the little things in the offer in compromise, but bottom line, those are the steps that you need to take to get to offer in compromise. And finally, I would just say, communicate with your lender, respond to them when they call or they email. As a former lender, I can tell you, if people didn't respond, we were much more likely to file a lawsuit than if people who are cooperative and they were trying to work with us. It wouldn't change a no to a yes, but if we're on the fence and you've done everything you can and you've created some goodwill, then yeah, maybe I would recommend it for approval. So stay in touch with your lender, be responsive, be respectful. Keep in mind, the workout people, they're just doing their job. Yes, some of them are jerks. I totally get it. But a lot of them, you're just a file on their desk. And if you make their life easy, if you're pleasant to them, it certainly can't hurt. It can't make your situation worse by being polite and responsive. So that's it. If you want to read anything else about the SBA offer in compromise, I have written over 200 articles, and they're all on my website, on my SBA loan default blog. You can go to jasontees.com. I will put the link in the notes below. Thanks for checking in.